Support for Celebrity Memoir Book Club comes from the all-new Nissan Murano. Claire, what do you know about life?
Life is the thing we're living right now?
Yeah, this life. Life, it's busy, it's loud, and it moves at hyperspeed.
That is so true. And that's why I'm really grateful that the all-new Nissan Murano with relaxing massaging seats and a modern spacious interior gives you an unapologetic refuge from life's daily hustle and bustle.
Well, get me in there right now. Fling open the door and I'm hopping into the all-new Nissan Murano.
It's my favorite place to take a deep breath and exhale the day's pains away.
Because once you're inside an all-new Nissan Murano, there's nothing to do but just drive.
I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where we see books outside of ourselves and then we focus into the middle and we say, what is the purpose? What can this book do to be of service to our greater humanity? And then we tell that to you. And the answer, what can this book do? It can be destroyed.
Or it can make one man very, very rich, which, as we all know, is the goal of being a monk.
Totally. If you guys have been looking recently for a way to get very rich, I would recommend...
Have you tried monasteries?
The ashram. Claire, what's going on?
I think we're on tour.
Oh my God.
Are we in Toronto right now? Depends on when you're listening.
Yeah.
Anything's
Could
possible.
Could be.
Are you listening April 4th because we're in Toronto at the Royal Theatre?
Tonight.
Unless you're listening a different day, then it's a different night.
Are you listening on April 10th? Because then we're in Philadelphia.
The 11th, DC.
The 24th of April?
San Francisco.
May 1st?
Chicago. Is that how they said it up there?
Yeah.
Chicago.
My dad says Chicago.
Well, that's my culture. He's kind of appropriating.
Chicago. He got Chicago.
Okay, that's a made-up thing that he's invented.
He's got a way of saying things where I say, how'd you come up with that?
Him and Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
The two great linguists.
And dancers. Where are we going to be on May 16th?
London.
And then May 18th?
Dublin.
And then finally, we wrap up our tour on June 14th right here, baby. In
Brooklyn.
This very seat. Just kidding. Down the road.
What if we invited you guys to our studio and just said, just stand on each other's shoulders? Sure, we can only sit you 5 deep, but we could be 5 tall. This room we're in is actually a perfect cube.
That's so true. I always feel very comfortable in here because I love the way the dimensions feel cube-like.
You're a big cube gal?
I guess so, yeah.
You're a cube head?
Mm-hmm. You guys, we are going to be switching up our intro a smidge. I'm gonna hit you with a new cue. What is something you saw or watched or read this week that you would recommend?
Okay, I have actually like a very specific recommendation.
Great.
And that is reading a chapter of the book Braiding Sweetgrass before bed.
Okay.
It actually will improve and change your life. I don't know if it'll change your life, but it'll improve the quality of your sleep. And I do think that incrementally can up your game.
I think sleeping good makes life good.
Famously, a lot of life is when you're awake, and the best way to be awake during life is to have slept before.
Yeah.
I've been slowly trying to switch to reading before bed because I'm one of those people who likes to fall asleep with a laptop on. And don't you turn it off, not even if I'm asleep already. It's on. There's 3 people in this bed. It's you, me, and BoJack Horseman, and he's nocturnal. And so I've been trying to switch for the good of myself and my marriage to reading and then quietly putting the book down when I'm about to go to sleep. First of all, that on its own, huge. I hate to report back. I hate to be one of those people, but it turns out not falling asleep to like loud noises is helpful. It helps to like get your eyes a little bit tired. It helps to like distract yourself with the written word. And then Braiding Sweetgrass is a book of, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's not a narrative story. It's like chapters by an indigenous biologist, ecologist, and she's an incredible writer. I mean, she's a poet. And so every chapter is like a small anecdote that teaches you something about nature, teaches you something about like Native American history, and then has a beautiful metaphor wrapped up into it. And they're very hopeful and they very much counteract doom scrolling, I think. So if you're somebody who is used to looking at Twitter and seeing all of the horrors of the world before bed, might I suggest a beautiful analogy about the acorn? It really is so good. And I swear to God, it'll fix your life. Not fix your life, but it'll fix your sleeping habits.
That's so good. Oh my God. I had a really bad sleep this week where I've been sleeping with my phone outside my room, but on the weekends, sometimes I
as a
get
treat.
to snuggle with my phone as a little treat.
When Mag is out late, I'm like, if you're out late, then watch out. Laptop. It's like my little affair.
I woke up in the middle of the night and I started panicking about something that if I had just read the email instead of only looking at the headline of the email, it like wouldn't have been worth panicking about. But instead I didn't sleep. And then I was just looking at Twitter and everyone was freaking out.
Wait, you had your phone in your hand and you just didn't check the email?
Yeah.
To see that the thing you thought was tomorrow was in 3 weeks?
Yeah.
My understanding was like, well, your phone was outside of your room. So how could you check?
Nope. It was
in your hand.
I saw the front of the email. I saw it pop up and I said, oh, fuck, I fucked up. And then I said, just don't even look at it and you won't have to think about it. And so instead I spiraled about it and watched people tear to shreds that guy who was like doing push-ups and dunking his head in ice water twice. You see that guy on Twitter?
I missed him. I was reading. Sorry. I was learning about why purple and yellow flowers look so beautiful next to each other.
Why?
Because of the cones and the rods in our eyeballs. Anyway, Ashley, do you have a recommendation for this week? Would it be reading emails?
No, I don't recommend that. I still think steer clear, but don't look at the subject line either. My recommendation for this week is the new Japanese breakfast album just came out last Friday. I saw
she like posted a warning.
She posted a warning about it?
On Instagram. She's like, this is a different album. That was her warning to the listeners.
It is magical. Warning, alert. Unless you want to transcend, don't listen to it. You know, remember Caroline Calloway, speaking of Lena Dunham's beautiful sentences? Mm-hmm. Listening to this album, I really was just like, wow, beautiful sounds. It's just like beautiful sounds. It's called
beautiful.
For Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women. And it really is just like...
Is that you? Would you consider yourself a melancholy brunette or a sad woman?
You know, at times.
Okay.
And it's not melancholy or sad. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. You get a treat. If you've been suffering, here's a treat.
It's like light, but so flavorful. Like, I don't know how to explain it other than that because it is so like airy and bright, but then there's so much going on. Like, you know, when there's just so much sound happening, but it's not like crashing. It's like lifting.
Wow.
I love it.
Exciting.
So,
and you know who else loves sounds?
Who?
And is trying to lift?
Don't tell me that you're going to compare my recommendation to anything this man would say.
I think he also is trying to transcend, and I think he is a brunette.
And he is sad to me.
Well, don't cry for him because I think he thinks he won.
Oh,
I think he's pretty happy with how things shook out at the monastery and beyond, and mostly beyond.
This week, we're reading Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day by Jay Shetty.
If you don't know who Jay Shetty is, we didn't either. He was just like this man who took the internet by storm. He was Boy Mel Robbins, for those of you who know Mel Robbins. He just like started showing up on podcasts, and I guess he has a long and storied history of giving mindful classes to consultants, which is exactly where I want to be. You know who I want to get my spirituality advice from? The main guy that helps keep Accenture chugging along happily.
I want to derive purpose from the guy who helps consultants derive purpose.
Yeah, he started at the bottom, aka Accenture, and now he's at the top, aka Jennifer Lopez's fourth failed wedding. He is somebody who went from a friend to the monks to friend to the stars.
I don't want to say that he was ever friends with the monks. He knows some.
He met monks.
He said, what you guys are doing here, actually, I think people would pay a lot of money for it.
He was able to wring out a lot of value. It's funny. I know that investors are like, in the finance world, what they love to do is get outsized returns for investors. And he really
private equity'd mindfulness.
Yeah. Bought low, sold high. He chopped it up into worthless little pieces and then destroyed the middle class.
He did what they did to Panera Bread. He said, I'm going to take something that people really like and provides value in certain communities.
And I'm going to make it worthless.
And I'm going to absolutely gut it. I'm going to take all the individual pieces and I'm going to say, how can we cheapen these at every level? And I'm going to sell it back to you.
Yeah, and that is something that you need to be, he consulted it. He really consulted Buddhism, which is what I think we've all been looking towards to find light and mindfulness. Basically, we're doing this book because I keep seeing clips of him online and being like, he's stupid, right? Like, this is some dumb shit. But like, of course, he's only ever doing interviews with people who like him. So they're always just sitting there being like, wow, yeah, wow, so true. I think the thing that really tipped me over the edge was I watched him say that the problem in today's lifestyle is that we don't search out news finds us.
He says you wake up in the morning and you're being confronted with 1,000 tragedies a day in the first hour of waking up. And he's like, you can't live like that.
I guess I do think it is true that looking at your phone, of course, first thing in the morning is not a great thing for your brain. But this concept of you need to start seeking out your own news. That's how we ended up with red-pilled Holocaust deniers. What do you mean seek out your own news? I was trying to think, I was like, historically, how have we got news? I'm like, okay, how would you have felt about when newspaper boys literally threw the news at your front door? We used to wake up with a crash of news against our home, physically assaulting us. Was that bad too? Should we be foraging for news? It's just what he says has no inherent meaning. And yet people are always like, wow, deep, interesting. And I was like, someone's got to put a fucking stop to this. Because we cannot let a man tell us he is a monk that also is good friends with John Krasinski. I don't know if they're friends, but they seem similar.
They do kind of the same job, I think. They deliver some good news with a face full of filler and and a mind full of curses.
Anyway, so think like a monk. Also, by the way, you may know that he had a hit piece written against him by the New York Times, I think it was, or was it the New Yorker?
I think it was the Guardian.
Oh, finally somebody guarding
our peace and our minds.
I chose not to read it before I came into this book because I was like, I want to let the book stand on its own. Because also, I don't know, if you're not listening to the Patreon, you may not know this about me. I'm very much in a place right now where I'm open to bullshit.
Yeah.
He could have got my ass. I am reading other self-help books. I am thinking about getting Reiki.
From me explaining Mel Robbins to you, you were hella on board. It wasn't until you accidentally listened for yourself that you were like, wait a second.
No, this is nonsense. And I'm very receptive to an analogy and a metaphor. You give me a wise old man enters the temple and I'm like, that's so true. That's exactly how it's like posting on Instagram. I'm like, you got my ass. Anything from a metaphor to a myth to a meme. Sometimes I'm like, dang, they really did distill it to its essence.
Okay, here is my greatest gripe about this book is I think you could say monkdom is either beautifully complex or absolute simplicity, and it's kind of the marriage of the two. And what he did is he turned it into the dullest shit. And that's the greatest insult that you could do, is make something so intense and spiritual and bridges the span of the universe and say, how can I make this as boring as humanly possible?
Not just boring, but
worthless.
Without any larger global context. There's no accountability. It's just very difficult to, as I said, it's hard to read this book without the background knowledge that he has absolutely pursued fame and wealth to the highest degree. He talks about living in LA. He's friend to the stars. He talks a lot of shit about being on your phone first thing in the morning, but his bio is Jay Shetty, social media superstar and host of the #1 podcast. For somebody who hates social media so much,
it seems to have really worked for him.
He seems to have won the game of it. There was an expose about how he's a scam artist in The Guardian. I chose not to read it because I wanted to let this book speak to me first, because I was a believer that there could be something in here for me. I am open to it. Unfortunately, this was the worst collection of boomer mom Facebook posts I've ever seen in my life. This is the spiritual version of It's Wine O'Clock. Do you know what I mean? This really was, this was about as deep as a tea bag with a little don't forget, compassion comes with passion. You know what I mean? It's really nonsense. A. B, we will be reading that article and then looking back at this book through that lens on the Patreon this week. So if you feel that we have left stones unturned, I also will be doing a brief research on his monkdom. And I believe he's a Buddhist monk. That's what he claimed to be, right?
I think
there's lots of kinds of monks, I think.
To be a Christian
Is that what
monk.
he is? He's a Christian monk?
I think so.
Okay.
Maybe he's a Buddhist monk.
That's what, okay.
Can I say the problem is he might not be a monk at all?
My point is, I will do a deep dive on that and then study up on those people, that collection of beliefs, because I can't imagine he's aligned with it. And just to get the ball rolling.
He's not aligned with it because the beliefs he explains in this book are not aligned with the beliefs that would lead to writing this book.
Exactly. To get a kickstart, I want to talk about this very opening, the dedication for my wife, who is more monk than I will ever be. I guess
not monk at all, bitch.
But I also am just I'm sorry, isn't being a monk a real thing? It's not just an adjective, right? But that's exactly where I want to begin is what is monk to you? I don't know enough about global religions to be as cutting as I want to be, which is my bad. But I remember in high school, those kids who were I'm Buddhist. And they're it's not actually a real religion. It's just a Zen way of being. And then you're actually, I think it is a real religion to the people who practice it. Did you ever hear that line? They're well, it's not a religion. It's and then I'm no, I think they do have like a whole
religion.
Yeah, I think to them it is. And that's how I feel about him. He's like, oh yeah, I'm like a monk. And I'm like, okay, but like to monks, you're not. Monk isn't just adjective that you get to put on whoever seems cool.
In a world where there are no monks, you're a monk. In a world where there are monks, you're not one of them.
In a world where like literally means the opposite of literally, you're a monk. In a world where words have meaning and we stick to them for practical reasons, you're not a monk.
Take a sip every time we say monk.
Yeah, what are you guys drinking? What time of day is it? You getting blackout? Are you listening to this at the bar? Does someone go to the jukebox and throw in a little CMBC? What was so hard for me about this book, I think, compared to, I recently read The Karma of Success, which was like hit and miss. I'll do a review of it somewhere. I actually wrote a whole one up and then never posted it anywhere. But one of the problems with all these self-help books is they're kind of like how to use spirituality to help you in the boardroom. You know what I mean? Or even like lean in, how to be a better parent so that you're a better CEO. But something that I respect about all those books is there's an honesty to being like, we're all trying to win the game. Here's some external ways to think about. Here's some like secondary tactics to help you win the game. He is denying that we're trying to win the game, but he's won it. Do you know what I mean? I feel that there's at least they're all admitting that like the purpose of doing this is so that we can all get a promotion. He's like refusing to acknowledge that that's the game he's playing, even though all of his values align with like billionaires. And celebrities and some of the like most sick, perverted people on the planet.
Yeah, it's so important to know that if you are looking for a spiritual guide that won't make you feel guilty for hoarding wealth, Jay Shetty is your man.
Or like make you hold yourself accountable for anything. The problems of the world aren't really your problems.
So I talked on the Patreon last week about this philosopher's belief in loserdom and in like eschewing the societal pressure of success, and how like in aiming to not turn everything into a success story and find success and meaning in everything, you can just be, which actually to me felt very in line with when he was trying to explain monkdom. It feels very not like winning or losing. There is no end. You just have to continue to be. And he keeps taking it and twisting it and saying, and that is how you find success at. And it's like, well, what you're saying is the opposite of what you're saying. The point is to just exist, and not every failure has to be like, and that failure is how I found success. That failure was a failure, and then later there was a success, and next there will be like everything just is. And I think that that's what the monks were trying to tell you, and then you have to turn it into an Accenture presentation.
Mm-hmm. When I was 18 years old in my first year of college at Cass Business School, London.
Is that good?
I don't know. If it was good, it'd be in America. Am I right? JK. One of my friends asked me to go with him to hear a monk talk. Why would I go hear some monk? I asked.
I often went to see CEOs, celebrities, and other successful people lecture on campus, but I had zero interest in a monk. I mean, to this day, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
I prefer to hear speakers who had actually accomplished things in life. Anyway, he goes to see this monk and he falls in love.
It was love at first sight between him and this monk. My whole life, I'd been fascinated by people who'd gone from nothing to something, rags to riches stories. Now, for the first time, I was in the presence of someone who had deliberately done the opposite. He gave up the life the world had told us that we should all want.
So he is very impressed with this man because he got into like the MIT of India, he says. And instead he chose to be a monk. And he was like, whoa, it just goes to show he could have had everything, but he chose not to. And I'm like, even though I understand that this is coming from your 18-year-old perspective, I do believe this is still your perspective, that the idea of giving it all up only counts if you had something to give up. Like if somebody was like, oh yeah, I didn't do well on my SATs and I became a monk, he'd be like, oh, okay, so it sounds like you had no other options. But
yeah,
in order to have any value to Jay Shetty in shirking and rejecting society, you have to have first had the ability to win it.
There has to be something to shirk.
And I do think that that's a pattern of the people he quotes in this book, is he loves like a, she was on top of the world, the number one CEO anybody had ever seen. She owned all the oil and all the child labor. And then she said one day, why don't I think about death?
And then she said one day, what if instead of making the children labor, I train them to be successful adult laborers?
Mindfulness. So a lot of his work is backed up by
research. He says it's actually scientifically proven that if you can meditate, then you age slower. Like everything has this important like scientific backing for why in the modern world, these monk practices will bring you greater success in the way that we view material success.
Brother David Steindl-Rast, a Benedictine monk who founded gratefulness.org, writes, a layperson who is consciously aiming to be continuously alive in the now is a monk. So I guess like in that way, anybody can be a monk. And I guess in that way, Jay Shetty and his wife are both monks.
And she's more monk than he'll ever be.
And I'm more monk than both of them.
Anyone's a monk.
I'm monk.
I'm monk too.
I'm monk fish.
I'm the monk reboot on CBS. Like most monks today, I didn't grow up in an ashram. I spent most of my childhood doing unmonk-like things. Until age 14, I was an obedient kid. So he had a couple years of acting out, and then he ended up going to business school.
Can I tell you, and this is like the hardship of his life, whenever he goes back to being like, I had to think about a time in my life where I knew fear. He's like, when I was 14, I did really bad at geometry.
Yeah, he almost got expelled from school, but then he said, give me another shot, coach. And they said, okay.
Monks weren't born monks. They're people from all sorts of backgrounds. Andy Puddicombe, co-founder of the meditation app Headspace, trained to be in the circus. And then did he become a monk? Or did he just go from the circus to the Headspace app? But do you know what I mean? Like, who the fuck gives what the founder of Headspace thinks? That is like an evil app that's stealing all your data by like lulling you into a false sense of meditation. That's like the worst monk there is.
That is really evil monk shit. I can't believe his heroes are all the people who are like, okay, I spent a minute learning what the monks had to say, and I said, there's money in that.
Literally, anybody at a yoga class in Silicon Valley is his hero.
Yeah. For the next 4 years, I juggled two worlds, going from bars and steakhouses to meditation and sleeping on the floor. So he was in business school, and in the summer, he would split his time. Half of it, he would do an internship, and half of it, he would go to India and study at the ashram, and he would bring those practices back to business school. And then when he graduated from college, he said, I'm going to be a monk. He liked being around monks more than he liked being around his business school fellow interns. And so he decided to go and be a monk full time, and everyone said, you're crazy.
My 3 years as a monk were like a school of life. Yeah, I imagine that. It was hard to become a monk and even harder to leave, but applying the wisdom to life outside the ashram, the hardest part, felt like the final exam. Every day I'm finding the monk mindset works. That ancient wisdom is shockingly relevant today. That's why I'm sharing it.
3 years after I moved to Mumbai, my teacher, Gauranga Das, told me that he believed I would be of greater value and service if I left the ashram and shared what I'd learned with the world. No fucking way did he say that. I'm sorry. I will put $1 million on the table right now that your spiritual teacher did not say, in 3 years, you've learned all that monks can learn. Go off and share.
What's crazier is in the pages ahead, I will walk you through the 3 stages of adapting to the monk mindset. First, we will let go, stripping ourselves from the external influences, internal obstacles, and fears that hold us back. Second, we will grow. Finally, we will give. Imagine you could be a monk too in 289 pages.
It took him 3 whole years to learn an entire lifetime of spirituality, but you can learn it in 300 pages.
Part 1, let go. Chapter 1, identity.
Our identity is wrapped up in what others think of us, or more accurately, what we think others think of us. So that is the thing that holds us back, is we're not even obsessed with what others think of us. We're obsessed with obsessing with what we assume others are thinking, and it holds us back, man.
And so he's like, listen, we're all essentially just method acting through life. None of us have a real sense of self. We're all just going through the life acting the way other people told us that they think we should act.
Yeah, he references 3-time Best Actor winner Daniel Day-Lewis and his penchant for method acting. He says we're all kind of like Daniel Day-Lewis.
And I'd have to agree. We try to live up to what we think others think of us, even at the expense of our values. And then he says this. He has this interesting way of using the we statement, in which I go, bitch, you don't know me.
Who's we?
Rarely, if ever, do we consciously, intentionally create our own values.
Okay, tell that to our fucking corkboard.
Throughout the book, he'll be like, nobody ever sits down and thinks about what they want out of life. No 2 people have ever come together as a couple and said, what do we value? Like, people are never really thinking about identity or like reflecting on their day. I go, never? Bitch, everyone in Brooklyn is journaling constantly.
He really thinks that he is like breaking the news to you about a gratitude journal. In the fucking year of our Lord, what year did this come out? 2020. Another thing that I want to say, so one of the great shames of my life is that I used to be an avid listener of Pete Holmes.
That's okay.
I didn't know better. I was like 20. The thing is, I lived in LA and I listened to like 40 hours of podcasts a week. And there's only so many out there.
In LA, you listen to a lot of podcasts because there's very little conversation.
And I was driving. And I also had like a job where I did a lot of data entry.
Yeah.
So I was driving and listening and okay, whatever. The point is, I used to listen to Pete Holmes. He, in the time that I was listening to him, went from being a stand-up comedian that like helped inspire me to start a stand-up to someone who became obsessed with spirituality and like being guided by teachers in this way. Like he became obsessed with like Ram Dass and a lot of spiritual teachers, and Deepak Chopra is like his friend now.
It seems like almost anyone can be friends with Deepak Chopra if you are rich enough.
Yeah. It seems like he walked so Jay Shetty could run.
Yeah. He's just been at a lot of our famous people's big life events. It seems like for hire, if you want your wedding to have like an extra kick of spirituality or validity, Deepak Chopra can come and be like, I've never seen a love like this for $100,000.
Yeah. It's like Deepak Chopra will officiate, John Legend will sing. It will be very meaningful. And I'll tell you what, that 18 months is going to stretch into a good 3 to 5 years. Anyway, I used to listen to him, and I do feel that I recognize very similar patterns between him and Jay Shetty, where like men who love to preach about spirituality they just learned about are people who had never considered compassion. Like they really had never even considered having values and like being kind to the people around them. And so as soon as they heard it once, they were like, okay, it doesn't help me to stay in this temple. I have to get out there and tell people because no one else is considering this.
Well, what's so crazy is he leaves the ashram at 25, Jay Shetty, and he's always talking about like himself before and after the ashram. And I'm like, you're talking about a 19-year-old boy? Like, he's like, yeah, I used to not have good discipline. I'm like, yeah, you were 19 years old. Your brain wasn't fully developed. And now at 26, you think you have a good sense of things?
That's just frontal lobe solidification.
Imagine at 25 being like, well, I've learned all I can learn from the way the monk. I guess my mind is pretty still. It's time to cash out.
Anyway, I do think that there is just like a very specific type of man that loves to be like, we never considered this, so I have to tell you.
We had never considered there was another way to live besides being the most famous, richest person. But then I considered actually there is a way to live, and you still end up the most famous, richest person, but it's not by being a doctor. You know what, Jay Shetty? I think you could have helped a lot more people if you figured out how Neosporin works.
He's going to the ashram on his like summer breaks, and then he decides to go full time, and everyone is like, oh my God, you're throwing your life away. My decision to join the ashram turned up the volume on opinions and concerns around me, but conveniently, my experiences in the ashram had also given me the tools I needed to filter out that noise.
So he learns about having guiding values.
Our values don't come to us in our sleep. I actually think they do.
He's like, you've probably never considered having values before, but I think you should. And I was like, oh, I've considered it.
And then he says, you also have to think about your values and where did you get them from? And does that matter to you? Were your values instilled upon you by someone else? And it turns out when you really think about it, that stuff is actually not that big of a deal. And he really takes the time to say that if one of your values is success, that doesn't make you a bad person.
Neither does wanting to build as much wealth as possible.
Yeah, if your value is wealth, that can be like really good.
It's actually really good to like want to just be a billionaire. He says you have to be careful where your values come from. Like what you're consuming is what's feeding your mindset, which is true. You know what I mean? You're on social media a lot. That's probably warping your brain some. We are absorbed in celebrity gossip, images of success, violent video games, and troubling news. The more our values are tainted with envy, judgment, competition, and discontent. The way he's solved this is he doesn't really seem to have any concern about what's going on globally. And in this book, he'll recommend, he goes, nothing really is that bad. And if something is that bad, that doesn't have anything to do with you. There's like no sense here that you should worry about other people.
No.
His big thing is he goes, have you fixed your heart first? We can't fix the world until we fix our heart. I'm like, totally, but kids are being bombed right now.
Yeah.
Surely you can't wait till I learn forgiveness for my high school roommate to stop bombing those kids.
One of the really interesting things that there are like no broader examples about, only hyper-specific examples, is like when someone adopts an orphan, he'll be like, we have to view all the world's children as our own children. Do not zoom out on that. We kind of just mean this one situation.
Yeah, no. We love the idea of an orphan, but don't like look at a group of orphans and ask them to do anything.
Yeah, like if you're saying we have to like treat everyone around the world with compassion, like don't ask me which people I mean.
It's funny. How does he combat celebrity gossip? He became a celebrity, images of success. He just got really successful. Now he's just looking at himself. Now when he scrolls through his TikTok feed, he's just seeing himself talking to celebrities, So he's absorbing his own values right back again.
Yahoo! When we fill up our lives and leave ourselves with no room to reflect, those distractions become our values by default. Another way to create space is to take stock of how we are filling the space that we have and whether those choices reflect our true values. So he wants you to audit your time. Really look at how you spend your time and how do those contribute to your values? Are those the values that you want to be contributing to?
Good news. Your phone has something called screen time report. And he recommends you check out your screen time report. It could be helpful. I love this. So then he was like, so beyond looking at where you spend your time, look at where you spend your money. Because a lot of times, like how you spend your money might not be reflecting what you claim to care about. I was advising someone who complained that the family was overspending on after-school classes for the kids. Until she realized that she spent more on her shoes than on their music lessons.
Jennifer.
Women be shopping, am I right? A tale as old as time. He gives a bunch of examples about the way we very rarely live up to our own values or what we claim we care about. A 60-minute TV show flew by. 60-minute lunch with the family. Will it never end? And that's probably what you're saying. Is that what you guys say? Everyday coffee habit, $4 a day, almost $1,500 a year. You say, I needed it. Fresh, healthy food choices, an extra $1.50 a day, about $550 a year. You say it wasn't worth it.
Who is he talking about?
15 minutes scrolling social media. Me time. 15 minutes of meditation. No time. That's what you idiots say. You sound so stupid. And Jay Shetty hates you.
I say for $1.50 a day, I'm turning my fucking Big Mac into a sweet green salad.
The difference between a coffee and healthy food is the time and energy it takes to cook, prepare. It's very different. And also, I love spending money on coffee because one of my values is community. And I think in order to have lots of local businesses, you have to be constantly investing in them. And I like to be able to say hello to somebody in the morning that I know. I like to be a regular because that is my value.
When Jay Shetty finds out about food deserts, he's going to shit himself.
Don't tell him. He hates negativity. He doesn't think you should be complaining about things.
That's so true. Because you've got to filter out the noise. And right now what I'm doing is creating noise.
So there's high values and low values. The lower values are greed, lust, anger, ego, illusion, and envy. The higher values are a lot. Wow. Fearlessness, purity of mind, gratitude, service and charity, acceptance, performing sacrifice, deep study, austerity, straightforwardness, nonviolence, truthfulness, absence of anger.
So one of his recommendations for once you figure out your true values and how you want to move forward, like you can't just change yourself overnight, but one thing that helps is just moving to a new place and starting over completely.
He recommends like Marie Kondoing your life.
Yeah.
Marie Kondo's book, Thinking It's Unnatural to Purge, but Letting Go is a direct route to space, literally, and stillness. Choices come along every day, and we can begin to weave values into them. Whenever we make a choice, whether it's as big as getting married or as small as an argument with a friend, we are driven by our values, whether they are high or low. If these choices work out well for us, then our values are in alignment with our actions. But when things don't work out, it's worth revisiting what drove the decision you made. I find that so interesting because I actually think in life, living in accordance to your values often leads to a more difficult situation. Like this idea that like, I'm trying to live just and I don't want to align with that person who, you know, has been accused of rape, maybe Jay Shetty. That's not necessarily good for business. But do you know what I mean? Like in a world that has such sickness to its core, I don't know that every time you like live in accordance to your values, like quote unquote works out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sucks, but that's like what's hard about living.
This next part is like the anecdote to what you're saying, but it is to me like negating his whole living in accordance with your values, because if there's nothing that you're coming up against, like if your values don't come up, then does it even matter that you have them? So he's saying to like move away and like remove from your life the things that aren't in accordance with your values. So when he was living in London and he had started studying at the ashram over the summer, it was very hard for him to live in accordance with the values he was learning there while also being in business school in London. But when he moved to India full time and like lived there full time, it was a lot easier for him to maintain those values and to live in accordance with the way he was being taught because it consumed every day. And it's like, well, yeah, fucking of course, it's easier to wake up and meditate and not look at your phone and like not value your worldly possessions when those things have all been stripped out of your presence. Like it's impressive to live that way in business school because you're coming up against things that are in opposition to your values constantly, and you have to actively live according to your values.
Mm-hmm. I'm also just saying that like this idea of if you're doing a good job, things go good is not necessarily true.
Right.
he's like, listen, find new friends. He goes, you need to find people who agree with your values. Use things like LinkedIn and Meetup, tools like Facebook groups to make it easier than ever to find your tribe.
He loves apps. Let's talk about negativity.
So he tells this story about being an intern at, I'm so confused how he was both in the ashram and an intern in a finance firm every summer between college.
I think the Guardian article will clarify for us.
Because how could he have had 2 full-time jobs every summer, one in India, one in London?
I think he met a monk one time.
So something that happened to him was he noticed back when he was in this finance internship, people would gossip. They'd say things like, did you hear about Gabe? He's sinking fast. He doesn't believe in gossiping, even though I do believe this story is gossiping. He'd be like, can you believe those motherfuckers gossiping?
Which motherfuckers?
Okay, wait, can I do a joke that I used to do on stage?
Yeah.
Okay, I used to have a bit about being like, I love talking shit. And I was talking shit about one friend to another friend the other day. And my friend goes, actually, Claire, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. And I was like, yeah, whoever said that was talking about someone. Like, that's not based off a great idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like, gossiping's bad. And in order to prove it to you, I'm going to tell you a story about some gossipers I know.
I've got some gossip to share about the gossipers. Once I spent time in the ashram, I became very sensitive to gossip. We use gossip to put others down, which can make us feel superior to them and or bolster our status in a group. Some of my friends and colleagues stopped trying to gossip with me altogether. We had real conversations instead.
What do you talk about if not people? I'm sorry. Everything that exists to the human mind is filtered by the human experience. This idea that like there's anything to talk about besides others feels insane to me.
And also this idea that like all talking about others is negative or saying something negative is inherently negative. I'm sorry. It's not gossip to say that someone sucks.
But that's what he thrives on. He's like, don't critique me, because if you were to critique him, you'd see that he has no inherent moral structure. He goes, I didn't want to be the morality police, but I also didn't want to participate. Okay, well, you just fucking wrote a book about how to exist and you're telling me how to live. You're telling me that you're never allowed to critique someone else. And maybe that's true of monks, but you are not a monk. You are J-Lo's friend. We live in a world that is not perfect, and it takes a critical eye to hold things accountable. And I really like reject this idea that it's so good to like never see the bad, because that's how we get like a Joe Rogan pipeline to the alt-right.
Yes, when you're never critically thinking about anything you see or hear, then you just are listening to Jay Shetty drone on and saying that it makes sense. Because it doesn't make fucking sense.
In a world where we like are taught to value the most successful people, but the most successful people are like making other people's lives worse.
Like speaking of J-Lo, for example,
Sorry, not to hate J-Lo, I just really...
But I want to use J-Lo as an example. When we watched her movie and listened to the accompanying album that she made, what was it called? This Is Me Now?
This is me now. I think that's how it went.
Yeah, no, that was it. We went on the internet and critiqued it because it was objectively bad. It was bad work done by a very talented, well, a very beautiful lady.
And I think she's hardworking.
Really hardworking.
And she wants it. Man, does she want it.
But the amount of people in the comments saying like, don't talk about her, don't criticize, don't whatever. It's like, what do you mean? Why? Like everything that comes into being is perfect. That's not true.
So here's where he gets like beyond preposterous. He's like, negativity is everywhere. That's the name of this section. You wake up, your hair looks terrible. Your partner complains that you're out of
my hair?
I guess. That's never happened to you?
It's happened, but I worked really hard on it this week.
No, you look great.
Thank you.
You wake up, your hair looks terrible. Your partner complains that you're out of coffee. On the way to work, some driver who's texting makes you miss the light. The news on the radio is worse than yesterday. Your coworker whispers to you that Candace is pretending to be sick again. Every day we are assaulted by negativity. No wonder we can't help but dish it out as well as receive it. These are very different things. Your hair looking terrible. The fact that you're out of coffee, that just like is true. Someone's texting and makes you miss. Okay, a texting driver is like actually like a life-threatening thing. That is something that could like really fuck up your life. You're allowed to be like nervous because there are very practical implications that are negative. That's not negativity. That's dangerous driving. The news on the radio is worse than yesterday. This idea that caring that people's like lived experiences are deteriorating is like you just not being monk-like.
Are you supposed to just sit there and be like, well, at least my life is good?
He later goes, perhaps their political beliefs are generating the fear that their world is unsafe. Oh, he's talking about people online. like fear mongering. I just feel like this idea that anybody who feels unsafe is just trying to get clicks is so fucking privileged and out of touch and so selfish. Like there are literal life-threatening dangers out there. We are currently living in a world where ICE has the right to deport anybody without just cause or like jury. You've got trans rights are being threatened. We have like hate crimes are up. There's literal wars happening. The idea that you're not like you caring about those things or just like you being filled with negativity.
Imagine like people who are currently undergoing a genocide and he's sitting there being like, why don't you try to think positive thoughts?
This book came out in 2020. This is such a funny thing to say in the midst of a literal global pandemic. Like thousands of people died.
Bad things do happen in our lives. We're all victims at some point, whether we're being racially profiled or cut off in traffic. Those are such different things. I'm sorry. If you are being racially profiled, like that could create a pipeline. Like there is a cause and effect that will ruin your life.
People have died in police custody because of racial profiling.
But if we adopt a victim mentality, we're more likely to take on a sense of entitlement and behave selfishly. So he goes into this study where he finds that if you believe yourself to be a victim, then you are less giving to others because you think you deserve something back.
But he's also saying don't be worried about the rest of the world.
Yeah.
We think that complaining will help us process our anger, but research confirms that even people who report feeling better after venting are still more aggressive post-gripe than people who did not engage in venting. Yeah, because you're full of energy. You're full of vim and vigor.
Because something happened for them to vent about. And to the other person who didn't vent, maybe nothing happened for them to vent about.
So then he goes through the types of negative people.
He talks about how complaining and negativity are contagious.
Here's how to reverse your external negativity. Become an objective observer. Back slowly away. And for every negative person in your life, so if you have like a negative coworker and you can't cut them out, try to have 3 positive people. Don't be a savior. Don't try to help others. That's like the fastest way to...
Don't attempt to fix a problem unless you have the necessary skills. If you don't have the energy and experience to help a friend, you can introduce them to other people or ideas that might help them. Maybe someone else is their rescuer. What the fuck?
So then he comes up with this thing called spot, stop, swap. Spot a feeling or issue. Stop to understand what it is. Swap in a new way of processing. So like if you're having a bad day, you can be like, I got fired from my job. Stop being worried about that. Spot why you're worried. It's like because you'll have no money to support your family. Swap it. What an opportunity
to get a new job.
I don't think a good attitude has ever hurt anybody really, but this book is like the worst, most basic nonsense advice that has not been given even a lick of new thought or interest. And I just like, I can't believe he's as successful as he is. He hasn't brought anything to the game.
Support for Celebrity Memoir Book Club comes from the all-new Nissan Murano. Claire, we're about to take a road trip.
I hope so.
And no, we are.
Yeah, hopefully.
Who's driving the car?
I would hope you, just because in the new Nissan Murano, the relaxing massaging seats are so comfortable that I like to just look out the window, feel myself doze off, and dream a better dream. What about you, Ashley?
You know, I like driving because driver gets the aux cord, ultimately
Fair
speaking.
enough.
And I do feel that you're able to pull all rank on music and audio choices.
Uh-huh.
Who's talking? Who's quiet? Who's listening to music? Who's letting me listen to music? That's the driver's choice.
Yes.
And that's a choice I love to make.
With a Bose premium sound system for the passenger DJs and massaging leather-appointed seats for those who love to take the wheel, the all-new Nissan Murano is the perfect sanctuary to let the stresses of everyday life melt away and enjoy the ride. I can't wait to use the Bose sound system to listen to ourselves.
Me too.
Crystal clear.
Can I say, I don't know that I like our voice outside of a Bose premium sound system. What we judge or envy or suspect in someone else can guide us to the darkness we have within ourselves. The evil king projects his own dishonor onto the good king. So he's saying by like entering negative headspaces, we are like absorbing other people's negativity and projecting it into our own lives. And he talks about how like you need to stop and slow down and like choose your words and your actions very carefully. The Bhagavad Gita refers to austerity of speech, saying that we should only speak words that are truthful, beneficial to all, pleasing, and don't agitate the minds of others. You have a podcast.
I also don't think, and you're a frequent guest. I will say, I bet he's not saying much. You know what I mean? It's a lot of words, little meaning.
He wrote a whole book.
A lot of words, little meaning.
I do feel like to sit here and say that you should speak very carefully and like only when it holds meaning and you're sure what you want to say, but to have released this book of nothingness, that's what I meant earlier when I said that his monkness is negated by the existence of this book.
I agree 100%.
All of it, like this sentence to me was such a glaring example.
I mean, the amount of money he has made off this book and speaking engagements and his podcast. Whereas he's like, when I was a Buddhist, I learned to give up all material possessions. And learning that helped me make the most material possessions. It's
but he
so
also
bullshit.
Never really did, I don't think.
Yeah, because what do you own at 22?
He was an intern and he was like living at home and he was going on his college break. So he was just living at his parents' house.
But he said it for 3 years after college he went.
Yeah, so if you never move into an apartment and have possessions.
He had to shave his head.
Totally.
And for men, that's a big deal. Instead of describing ourselves as feeling angry, sad, anxious, hurt, embarrassed, and happy, the Harvard Business Review, my spiritual literature, that's my book of God, the Harvard Business Review, lists 9 more specific words that we could use for each one of these emotions. Instead of being angry, we might better describe ourselves as annoyed, defensive, or spiteful. I'm going to start saying that. When you ask me how I'm feeling, I'm going to go spiteful.
Can I say, sometimes I really am. Revenge is the mode of ignorance. Forgiveness has been shown to bring peace to our minds. And he says when you forgive, you can't expect anything in return.
He says, in fact, science shows that in close relationships, there's less emotional tension between partners when they're able to forgive each other. Duh. Like, what are you talking about? Science shows that when you grease a knob, there's less physical resistance than before. That's like the whole, yeah. What are you talking about?
Science shows that when you eat a little snack, you're hungry less.
That's actually not always true. Sometimes I go, damn, that did not do it.
Negativity is a natural part of life. We tease and provoke and we express vulnerability and connect over shared values and fears. It's hard to find a comedy show that isn't based in negative observations. But there's a line between negativity that helps us navigate life and negativity that puts more pain out in the world. That means Jerry Seinfeld is one of his clients.
Well, he quotes one of my favorite comedians as a good example of how to be funny but nice.
I wrote LOL.
Ellen DeGeneres sees the line clearly. In an interview with Parade Magazine, she says that she doesn't think it's funny to make fun of people. The world is filled with negativity, and I want people to watch me and think, I feel good and I'm going to make somebody else feel good today. This is the spirit in which monks have fun.
She doesn't think it's funny to make fun of other people. She takes cruelty very seriously. She's not trying
professional.
She's not trying to goof around when she makes you want to die.
The less time you have to fixate on everyone else, the more time you have to focus on yourself. So he had to think about his deepest fear, and his deepest fear was doing bad in school.
Yeah, his deepest fear was disappointing his parents.
And I think this is why you can't take your monk studies from the age of 23 too seriously, because you're like barely a functioning person. If like you go to monk school to learn how to get over how bad you felt in high school for not being good at math, then you have to grow up.
You have to really examine your fears. You have to ask why. Why is this my fear? What is the root of it? You can't just look at a fear as the tree. You have to look at it as the roots.
Yeah, keep asking why. This section had the one story in the whole book I didn't know and I found very interesting.
What is it?
A few decades ago, scientists conducted an experiment in Arizona called the Biosphere 2, which was a huge steel and glass enclosure with air that had been purified, clean water, nutrient-rich soil, and lots of natural light. It was meant to be the ideal living conditions for the flora and fauna within. And even though it was a success, the trees would hit a certain height and just fall over. And they couldn't figure out why. And it turns out it was because there was no wind. In a natural environment, trees are buffeted by wind. They respond to that pressure and agitation by growing stronger bark and deeper roots to increase their stability. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Cool experiment, scientists. Yeah, you really can't recreate what we got here on Earth. It's very difficult. But then he adds a second example of how to like get away from fear. Do you guys remember Free Solo, that documentary about that guy who wouldn't say I love you to his girlfriend and was trying to climb a mountain? Did you watch that?
I know about it.
Okay. He talks about like fear is a good signifier of what's going on, but you don't use it to stop you. You use it to like rise to the occasion. And he talks about Hanold's fear. It prompts him to put in extensive amounts of focused work before he attempts a monumental free solo. Making his fear productive is a critical component of his training, and it's propelled Handel to the top of his climbing game and to the top of the mountains. They have definitely done studies on this guy, and he just doesn't have fear. That's like what's wrong with him. It's like he has like this defect in his brain where he doesn't, like the part of his brain that's supposed to light up during fearful times doesn't line up for him. So that's why he's able to do what he's able to do, because he's not overcoming it. Like there's nothing in his brain telling him like, don't try and climb a mountain by yourself. So it's so funny to use him as an example of somebody who's like used his fear productively, because like famously he doesn't have fear, and that's why he's constantly doing like death-defying things.
Yeah.
Like what a bad example.
Wait, I wanted to talk about the tree thing.
Sure.
It reminded me in terms of being a useful story, because I don't feel that the way he talks about it is particularly useful. But I feel like the way right now in our culture, people are trying to like cushion their lives as much as possible to never have a negative experience. Like in the way that people will be like, but how do I live in New York at age 23 with no roommates? How do I, because they don't want to have a bad roommate. And how do you like make sure you're never going to a restaurant that isn't like the best restaurant you've ever been to? And how do you like mitigate all of these potentially not perfect outcomes? You can't. And having sometimes a negative experience is what like strengthens you and like deepens your roots and your experiences and your relationships to then like be strong and like present for positive experiences.
I agree. And fear keeps you from thinking you could free solo a mountain, because honestly, most of us can't.
Yeah. When you deal with fear and hardship, you realize that you're capable of dealing with fear and hardship. Totes. The first step in transforming our fear from a negative to a positive is doing just that, working with it.
Oh, I have the word client circled here. He goes, sometimes we can trace our fears to the actions we take, and sometimes it's the actions we're reluctant to take. One of my clients was a successful attorney, but she was tired of practicing law and wanted to do something new. And I think here I had clients, ? And then I went, oh my God.
He's a life coach.
And that is really one of the lowest things a human can be.
She was afraid of failure and being seen as less than an intelligent and capable person by others and herself. Once she learned and acknowledged the true nature of her fear, she was on her way to recasting its role in her life. One of the problems was that she had no role models. She only knew hardworking full-time attorneys.
Me too. When we track our fears back to their source, most of us find that they're closely related to attachment, our need to own and control things. We hold on to ideas that we have about ourselves, to the material possessions and standard of living that we think define us, to the relationships that we want to be one thing, even if they are clearly another. This is what the monkey mind is thinking. The monk mind practices detachment. We realize that everything from our houses to our families is borrowed. So he's a big believer in like, you don't want to live in your monkey mind, you want to live in your monk mind. I actually just saw this on White Lotus last night.
Me too.
You know what? I really was like, that scene with the monk in White Lotus did a lot better of a job
explaining monkness than this.
It was just a lot more enlightening than this whole fucking nonsense book.
Yeah. You have to ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? You have to audit your attachments and then realize that none of them make you who you are.
He has this one quote that I actually thought was pretty good. And then it's because he's quoting somebody else. And it's that like,
fear makes us fiction writers.
No.
Oh.
It's detachment. It's not about not owning anything. It's that nothing should own us.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that's a good way to put it. You were right to steal that. So basically, during monk training, you're taught not to judge the moment. You know, things happen. There's a farmer whose horse runs away. His neighbors are like, how unlucky. The horse knocks down a fence, runs away. Everybody's like, that sucks. He's like, maybe. And the hole in the fence, another horse pops up and they're like, what great luck. And he goes, maybe. His son is on this new unbroken horse trying to like teach it to plow or whatever. And he gets bucked off because he's chaotic and breaks his leg. And everybody's like, that sucks. And the farmer just goes, maybe. The next week, the military comes by to conscript his son, but they don't take him because his leg is broken. Everyone goes, how lucky. And then he's like, maybe. The whole point is you don't know.
Yeah.
Things just are.
Don't judge the moment. We do our best celebrating in hindsight. When we're actually experiencing challenges, it's difficult to tell ourselves this could end up being a good thing. But that's because it just is. It doesn't have to be a bad thing or a good thing. It could just be.
Whether you suppress your fears or run away from them, your fears and your problems remain with you, and they accumulate. We used to think, this killed me. We used to think it didn't matter if we dumped our trash in landfills without regard for the environment. If we couldn't see it or smell it, we figured it would somehow just take care of itself.
Who's we?
And he's like, yet it turns out that's like so bad for us. And it's gotten in our water and now our water is poisoned. And I'm like, who is we?
Who thought landfills were just like chill and fine.
But then you're not allowed to vent. It's like, he's like, you can't suppress it, but you can't talk about it. But he's like, nobody's ever thought about intentions or values or where trash goes. I'm like,
Jay Shetty.
I feel like second graders do trash.
What did you think about? What did you think about before you were 19?
Hustling, grinding, getting that cash, birds. In the pussy sense, not in the birding sense.
I thought he was birding.
No, that's your monk mind, not your monkey mind.
Intention. Blinded by the gold. So now you know what drives you, what drives your ambition, your values, what makes you happy.
I don't. Can I say something we missed? A highlight I have is like on page 12, he goes, well, now you've learned how to like find your own true inner being. And I was like, it's page 12.
It's also
I think that's a lifetime hunt.
Not true. He tells you to like do an audit of what your values might be and like where they come from. Because I actually do find it quite valuable, that values exercise we did with that like happiness wheel. I think you linked it in our newsletter in
December. Or January.
If anyone's interested in it, it's in our Substack. But it is helpful to like see a lot of words listed out and be like, which ones are important to me? Mm-hmm. He doesn't really do any of that.
There's no real exercises here. There's one personality test.
Yeah. He just kind of is like, I don't know, think about what you think and then think about if that's like good or bad.
So somebody says like you need to think about your motivation. Basically, he sees all these monks who are really good at stuff. Like one's memorized all the scripture, one can meditate for hours, one can do something else. And he's like, I want to do those things. And they're like, well, why? Do you just want the accomplishment and the impressiveness, or do you want the journey of having studied and having practiced? This was a new concept for me and it blew my mind. Desiring an outcome has always seemed reasonable to me. The monk was telling me to question why I wanted to do what was necessary to reach that outcome. I guess here's the problem. One, this is stupid. But like the thing is it just because you were 20 that you hadn't thought about it? Like I get that a 20-year-old boy maybe hasn't really like found his purpose or his journey or his why. But like, it's a bad time to be going to a monastery because he's like, I never really thought about calling my mom on a Sunday before. I'm like, of course, you wouldn't have. You're a child. You just stopped living with her.
Because I do think that this is obviously common to get caught up in wanting what you think you're supposed to have accomplished, wanting what other people have accomplished, and not thinking about like why you actually want those things and like what you hope to gain from those things. I think that was like really helpful for me in comedy where it's like very comparative. To like look at what someone was doing and say like, is their exact specific thing even what I want? Or do I just think they're more successful than me and I'm jealous of it? Mm-hmm. Like it is helpful. I do think for someone who it seems like before he went to the monastery didn't really have very much direction. He was just like in business school being like, I guess I'll do a business.
And he did.
The
business of being a monk. Monk's business.
But like, do you know what I mean?
Oh my God, like monkey business, but monk is business.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry.
Trademark.
No, I don't want it. Jay, you can have it.
Don't give him anything. He has too much. Anyway, I'm saying that I do see the value in this. I don't think he is the person to, one, teach it. B, he like adds no value to that.
This feels very first level advice. He gives you no support in like engaging with this and exercising with it. So he tells you there's 4 motivators.
Because this I actually really disagree with, these 4 motivators.
Fear, desire, duty, love.
I mean, there has to be more than that. These 4 motivations drive everything we do. We make choices, for example, because we're scared of losing our job, wanting to win the admiration of our friends, hoping to fulfill our parents' expectations.
So he goes on to be like, fear isn't sustainable. That can't be it. Jim Carrey once said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see it's not the answer. He's like, listen, being successful and rich isn't going to help you. And then he cites that study that happiness after a certain like level of income that kind of fills your basic needs tapers off. And he goes, while having more money contributes to overall life satisfaction, the impact levels off at a salary of around $75,000. In other words, when it comes to the impact of money on how you view the quality of your life, a middle-class American citizen fares about as well as Jeff Bezos. Don't you ever fucking bring up Jeff Bezos' name in a
one middle-class American citizen who was on the Epstein docket.
Yeah, that's fun. That's how you get to enjoy yourself. I don't think any $75,000 a year earning men got to go to that island, so how are they even enjoying themselves?
I'm just saying they don't fare the same.
I just also think a man who is like absolutely wreaking havoc on our economy and our values and our environment, like don't bring him up as like you guys are actually the same. Like, don't do anything to defang that evil, disgusting man. Also, it's frankly not true. Whatever stat came up with 75K, at 75K a year, you're always like one injury away from bankruptcy.
Sorry, what year and in what city?
It's not true that if one family is living off of $75,000 a year, they have nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
That they're as happy as money could make them.
I mean, it's truly insane. Like, there is a tapering off, I'm sure. Money doesn't buy happiness, but like money does calm the other things that are preventing.
And it's, money doesn't buy happiness for somebody who's inherently like unhappy, but also like lack of money does cause unhappiness.
Right. If fear limits us and success doesn't satisfy us, you probably already guessed that duty and love have more to offer. So you want to be driven by duty and love. Happiness can be elusive. It's hard to sustain a high level of joy, but to feel meaning shows that our actions have purpose. Without a reason for moving forward, we have no drive. When we live intentionally with the clear I'm saying so many words.
Basically, he says you need a why ladder. Like, just keep asking yourself why. You know, when the little kid's like, but why? Get to the bottom of it. And then he says that's your purpose. And this is what's so fun. He goes, wanting to be rich for the sake of being rich is fine.
It's like not even bad.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's firmly in the category of material gratification, so you can't expect it to give you an internal sense of fulfillment. Nonetheless, material comforts are undeniably part of what we want from life. So let's get to the root of this goal rather than just dismissing it.
Wealth is your desired outcome. Why? I don't ever want to have to worry about money again. Why do you worry about money? I can't afford to take the vacations I dream about. Okay, Jay Shetty, let's stop there. Are you fucking telling me? I mean, I'm sure that the only people who've ever hired him are people who their biggest financial insecurity is that they dream of taking fancier vacations, say to Epstein's Island, and they can't.
Yeah, because he's dead, but why don't you take that why and become entrepreneurial and start your own?
And what happened to the people that live there? They're dead too? No, they're still in an island.
I'm sure they've aged.
Why do you want to take those vacations? I see everyone else on exotic trips on social media. Why do they get to do that when I can't? Why do you want what they want? Because they're having much more fun than I have on my weekends. Aha! So the root of what we want. Your weekends are unfulfilling. What's missing?
Money.
I'm sorry. People who like want financial security don't want that because they had a boring weekend. People who like desire financial security might say like not want to worry about the price of eggs.
Also, like the people who want like absurd amounts of wealth to just be like, yeah, good, go for it. But don't forget to ask yourself why. Because then he talks about this guy who comes up to a monk and says, I really want to be rich. My teacher would say, or are you putting words in his mouth? My teacher would say, okay, it's good that you're honest with yourself. Go ahead, make your fortune. You'll come to service anyway. It may take you 5 or 10 years, but you'll get to the same answer. Monks believe that the man won't be fulfilled when he finds his fortune, and that if he continues his search for meaning, the answer will always eventually be found in service.
Tell that to Elon Musk, who found his fortune and then said, what if I just buy America?
What if I make this country much worse for the poorest among us?
I have all the money that I could possibly have. So what if I turn that into much, much more money and I ruin everyone else's life?
What if I have kids I don't meet?
As monks, we learn to clarify our intentions through the analogy of seeds and weeds. When you plant a seed, it can grow into an expansive tree that provides fruit for everyone.
Then he talks about like the Good Samaritan story, that a bunch of like monks in school were told to give a lecture on the Good Samaritan story. And then on their way to the class, they all walked past a homeless person and no one stopped to help him because they were so busy with their class. Makes you think, huh?
Of course, having intentions isn't enough. We have to take action to help those seeds grow. So you have to identify your intentions, and then how can you live in service of those intentions? I don't fucking know. If you truly define yourself by your job, then what happens when you lose your job? If we live intentionally, we sustain a sense of purpose and meaning that isn't tied to what we accomplish, but who we are. Once you know the why behind what you want, consider the work behind the want. He also clarifies that no intentions are completely pure. So if you're like doing charitable acts to give back, like you are still getting some self gratification.
Because you're probably hanging out with your buddies.
Yeah, and like feeling like you did a good job. He throws a lot of these caveats in there to really like give examples to his rich clients that like when you're acting in self-service, that's also good. Anyway, so we breathe in and then out, and then in and then out. And now we're on to part 2. Grow.
Chapter 5, Purpose. So he uses this word dharma and he like keeps trying to like break it. He's like, in order to explain dharma, I need to explain varna. In order to explain varna, I need to explain seva. So basically dharma is purpose. And he says, living in your dharma is a certain route to fulfillment. When you spend your time and energy living in your dharma, you have satisfaction of using your best abilities and doing something that matters to the world. It's so funny because he has this whole chapter that he's like, it's just a really hard thing to explain. I couldn't possibly explain it to you. And I'm like, I was taught this in 5th grade by my principal, Miss Newman. She said, your purpose on this earth is to find the thing you love and then figure out how to use it to give back. And I was taught that in one sentence when I was 10 years old. And Jay Shetty's like, okay. So Sanskrit. Do you know about Sanskrit? So
okay, back it up. Okay.
Let's start with a Venn diagram. Who's written down the Venn diagram?
Okay, so you're driving down the road.
Elon Musk. You guys know him? He's a really good example of role model.
He talks about life in the ashram and how everyone had a different job and the jobs rotated. And so you always were contributing. You were always doing something different. Even if that you found something that you were particularly good at, you had to do all of the different chores. You had to rotate through all the different activities, even if it didn't feel naturally fulfilling, because you had to learn how to find fulfillment in things that you didn't find like inherently simple or useful or enjoyable. We needed flexibility in order to access every corner of study and growth. So one thing that's really important to note is that he finds that his strength is in studying, not in doing chores.
And so he doesn't speaking publicly.
Well, that's later.
Okay.
But first in the ashram, he's like, well, during study time, I feel like I really thrive, but during working time, that is really boring and sucks.
It's like, you don't understand. Some people are really good naturally at doing dishes. But not me. I'm really good naturally at like reading and thinking.
And I just found this to be so preposterous and selfish to like dive in on this over like 10 pages to talk about how much better he is at studying than he is at sweeping. And so like, even though he has to accept within himself and learn the lesson from why he also has to sweep, really, that's like not his dharma. Like he is just intelligent and better than everyone else. And so like someone should clean up after him probably.
So he's talking about like using your dharma, like your purpose to find where you're supposed to go in life. And he says this, you can't be everything you want, but you can be everything you are.
Wow.
And then he goes, it's hard these days because so many people succeed so early. And so we're like bombarded with images of super successful people in their early 20s, such as Mark Zuckerberg and Snapchat co-founder Evan Spiegel, who became the youngest billionaire in the world at age 24, along with celebs such as Chance the Rapper and Bella Hadid.
Do you think Evan Spiegel's still a virgin?
Yeah. Well, doesn't he have some like weird fucked up 4-pronged dick that can't fit in anything? So at best, he can only be 1/4 an unvirgin. There's something wrong with that dick.
Anyway, so finding his dharma, right? So he's really good at studying. He loves studying. One day, the monks ask him to lead a lesson, and he does a ton of extra research to make like a really good lesson. Our class gathers in a medium-sized room. I take my place at the elevated cushioned seat, and the students sit on cushions in front of me. I don't see myself above them in any way except for my elevated seat. No one asked. You just asked to lead that day. No one said, and you think you're better than everyone else here? To throw in an answer to a question that truly not a single person would have assumed. I mean, I would have assumed it from reading this book, but in that ashram classroom, I don't think anyone was saying, and is teacher superior? No, because you're taught that everyone there is equal.
And I assume they're all taking turns giving lectures. I assume it's like part of the coursework. Like when somebody in class gives a presentation, you're not like, wow, are they the teacher now? You're just like, that's just a fellow student and now he's like presenting.
Yeah. Anyway, so he teaches and they say, oh my God, you did such an amazing job teaching. We can tell how much work you put into this lesson. And he realizes his dharma, studying, experimenting with knowledge, and speaking.
Yeah, then he says that whole thing, don't be insecure if people who are younger than you are more successful than you. Lots of people become successful later in life, like Toni Morrison and Dietrich Mateschitz, the creator of the blockbuster energy drink company Red Bull. Okay, you're not Toni Morrison.
And this book does not give me wings. He's also still in his 30s, I think.
Well, he's not counting himself as an unsuccessful. He's saying you.
Oh.
Ashley. Oh. You might not be as successful as Bella Hadid, but don't worry. You could still be as successful
as Toni Morrison.
Yeah. Your time's ticking. You better start writing your book.
Well, maybe I could be as successful as Dietrich.
Is there anything left to do in the energy drink space?
Oh, Claire, you sound so fucking stupid right now. There is always something left to do in the energy drink space.
It's just so interesting to me that he's like, it's okay if you're a loser because one day you could still be number one. Like, He never pulls just a normal person. And I know that's like doesn't make for good books, but this idea of like, you can still be a billionaire. Even if you're 24 and not a billionaire yet, you become 40 and a billionaire. Like, look at this billionaire. Don't fucking bring Toni Morrison up in a list of Evan Spiegel, Mark Zuckerberg, and the Red Bull guy. Like, you leave her out of this. She's a very different person, and she is not a good example for anybody because most people are not Toni Morrison.
Also, I'm sorry, was Toni Morrison's goal to become a billionaire book writer? No. Toni Morrison just like wrote great literature.
Oh my God. Then he keeps going on to being like, you can't live somebody else's purpose. And the example he gives is Andre Agassi hated tennis, but he went on to live his dharma by providing basic services for children in his native Nevada with the Andre Agassi Foundation. It runs a K through 12 college preparatory school.
Did that not go out of business?
Yeah, like almost immediately. And also he wasn't like teaching those kids. He just had a lot of money. So he put it into something he knew nothing about and it blew up. Because actually there's already a lot of foundations that do a lot of like well-researched work. And this idea that you want your name to be on it, it just like fucks people up.
Here are 2 important caveats. Following your dharma doesn't mean you get a free pass. When it comes to skills, you should lean into your strengths, but if your weaknesses are emotional qualities like empathy, compassion, kindness, and generosity, you should never stop developing them. Second, a bad grade in school doesn't mean you get to ditch the subject altogether. We have to be careful not to confuse inexperience with weakness.
So he very quickly obviously figured out his dharma, and to enact it, he set up an extracurricular club at school called Think Out Loud.
This is the most horrendous thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Where every week people would come to hear me speak on a philosophical, spiritual, and/or scientific topic, and then we'd discuss it.
The topic of the first meeting was material problems, spiritual solutions.
Nobody came, but he still gave the lecture to the empty room because he thought it was that good. And he goes, I just had to learn from this mistake and work harder and put out more flyers. Eventually, it became a very successful group.
Can you imagine?
That's where he met his wife. I think she was like a participant.
Can you imagine being a college student and being like, oh my God, this other college student is doing these 1-hour lectures every week about spirituality. Better go to that.
I like had to read it 2 or 3 times to be like, what do you mean just you? It wasn't like opportunities for people to come and talk about things they care about. It was only your Think Out Loud was hear me talk out loud. Jay Shetty, the podcast, IRL, the live podcast.
This is insane.
So then he gives you quadrants of potential, and he does a really important diagram of skill but no passion, skill and passion, no skill and no passion, no skill but passion.
So you want to do something where you're skilled and passionate, and you definitely don't want to do something where you're not skilled and not passionate.
So he gives you some advice, like once you figure out your passion and skills, you can slowly work towards it. For example, he was a consultant at Accenture, but he started giving these like mindful classes.
Can I say, this was spoiled for you guys because we already talked about Accenture, but this is the first place it's ever mentioned.
Page 104.
Page 104, when I left the ashram, I took a consulting job at Accenture, a global management consulting firm, and this like knocked me out of my fucking seat. I could not believe that when he says he took 3 years at the ashram and then his teacher said, there's nothing left for you to learn here. You have to take your skills and give them to the world. The world was Accenture. It really like blew my mind in a way that I almost called you. I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I guess who else could he have been? It made so much sense to me.
I guess I thought that he went from the ashram to a podcast. I didn't know that he like in the middle.
Oh, please. He was a corporate speech giver.
Oh. But I thought corporate speech giver was like also, I didn't know he was just like an analyst.
Well, he wasn't a good analyst. It sounds like he was much like Simu Liu. All the worst men have roots in.
Can I tell you, at least fucking Simu Liu can do a backflip. That takes work.
Oh,
he
amen.
put effort in. He can do a flagpole.
I also do think Simu Liu is like always playing roles that make fun of himself.
I think he knows to make fun of himself, and I think he actually does have values.
Yeah, he's not out there being like, I'm a monk.
The thing is, I think what's cringe about him is that his values are so defined and he remains so true to them that like what we're looking at is cringe. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jay Shetty has no values.
He has values. It's the biggest house in the hills. And I think he's living it. Anyway, so he started doing like, he's like, can I do mindful talks for the group? And they're like, these are so good. And then he works his way up all the whole company and he basically stops doing consulting. And he's just like giving like these large form speeches about mindfulness and consulting. And everybody's like, you're the best speaker we've ever heard. You're better than the CEO. You're better than this guy from a rugby football team. People are freaking out. Never before have so many consultants been so listening. Everyone's freaking out. And he goes, you could do that too. Like even within your current job, maybe you find ways to inch towards your quadrant 2 of Dharma, your Dharma 2 quadrant, which is your purpose and passion. Instead of making a huge career change, you can try my approach. Look for opportunities to do what you love in the life you already have. You never know where it might lead. Leonardo DiCaprio hasn't given up acting or producing, yet he also directs significant energy towards environmental advocacy because it's part of his dharma.
It's so helpful for him to be on that yacht advocating.
Yeah, his dharma is not in any way cutting back on private jet usage, but his dharma is to tell other people what they could be doing. Why would he, one little person with an amazing life, have to give it all up when you, a stupid person with a stupid life, could stop eating hot dogs?
Claire, you are completely forgetting that one time that he went to the Oscars in a smart car.
Yes. Driving in LA.
He could have taken a Hummer.
Could he have?
But instead he took like a little car.
Oh my God, then he goes through all the quadrants in case you didn't know what not good at but love or not good at don't love means.
So his heroes are some of the worst people in the world, but his clients and his social circle is those worst people in the world. And I think that all of this book exists in service to be like, you can be a good person even if you're the worst. Like, I'll tell you you're a good person, even if you're the worst person.
When people ask you to do something, they're putting negativity in your life. And you have to first think about your own heart.
If people are gossiping, they're evil. If people are telling you that like you have a responsibility to those with less than you, they're not even considering that you're maybe helping yourself.
It's like this interesting circular logic about how to never really push yourself outside of your comfort zone and never have to hold yourself accountable to anybody but yourself.
Yeah.
And like what it is that you want to be doing. Because actually the way I give back is when I purchase beautiful, beautiful silks, I'm supporting an industry of silk makers.
Are those caterpillars just going to be unemployed?
In this economy, they're lucky for the work. Then he gets into the Vedic personality. There's a couple of different kinds of personalities. There's like the leader, the creator, the guide, the maker.
And he talks about each personality type within their mode of ignorance, mode of impulse, and mode of goodness.
I'm sure if this was like a full-on website or book on it, it'd be interesting. The way he shortens it to being like, creators are people who make. Entrepreneurs are people who entrepreneur. Leaders are people who lead. A good example of a leader is like an entertainer, a CEO, an entrepreneur, a president.
When leaders are working out of a mode of ignorance, they're leading you to something bad. When they're working out of a mode of goodness, they're leading you to something good.
A creator, on the other hand, would be someone who creates. So like an entertainer, a CEO, an entrepreneur, the president.
When a creator is working out of a mode of ignorance, they're creating something bad. And when a creator is creating out of a mode of goodness, they're creating something good.
Do one of these resonate with you? You're probably the one that resonates. Use this to map out the rest of your life.
And that's not to fucking say that a leader has to always be doing things for other people. It really is crazy when you're reading this through the lens of his like famous and evil clientele. Creators in their mode of goodness create products and ideas that make money, but also serve others.
The most important thing you can do is make money, and nobody can ever make you feel bad about that. Get richer.
Think about how if you make more money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can buy the Kate Danielle jeans. And then
other people get to see me in those jeans.
And
now they're inspired.
Cool. Plus,
inspiration.
Someone made those jeans for likely minimum wage. And guess what? What's worse than minimum wage? No wage. A person who isn't living in their dharma feels like a fish out of water. So he gives this example of a British expat named Emma Slade. She lived in Hong Kong where she worked as an investor for a global bank, and she was managing accounts worth more than $1 billion. I loved it, says Slade. It was exciting. I ate balance sheets for breakfast. Then she was attacked in Indonesia. An armed man pushed a gun into her chest, robbed her, and held her hostage. She wasn't hurt.
But it seems like the authorities came in and killed him.
Yeah. And she felt bad for him. And that feeling stuck with her and led her to pursue the question of her real purpose. She quit her job and began exploring yoga and the nature of the mind. She traveled to Bhutan, where a monk left an impression on her. Been there, he says. In 2012, she became a Buddhist nun, and she felt she'd finally found peace. But the feeling of compassion she felt for the man who attacked her returned, and Slade realized she needed to do something to put her compassion into action. So in 2015, she founded the UK-based charity called Opening Your Heart to Bhutan, where she seeks to meet the basic needs of people in rural areas of East Bhutan. Though she found fulfillment in becoming a nun, it was never her dharma to sit in a cave and meditate for the rest of her life. She now deploys her financial acumen in a way that serves herself and others more richly. He hates when people just sit and meditate. That really is the reason I wanted to read that whole thing, is because of that line where he goes, instead of just sitting in a cave and meditating all day, she found a real purpose.
Yeah, one that I can brag to you about. She used to be really successful, and I loved that about her. And then she found herself, and that was okay. But then she was winning awards. But then she turned it into something that could be a TED Talk. And that's more important than anything. Dharma isn't just passion and skills. Dharma is passion in the service of others. So then we get into routine. He says that you should go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. Waking up early leads to a more productive day. Successful business people wake up early. Tim Cook from Apple wakes up at 3:45. Richard Branson wakes up at 5:45. Michelle Obama gets up at 4:30. Okay. Then you should get a uniform like Steve Jobs, Barack Obama, and Ariana Huffington.
Steve Jobs died from that uniform.
Barack has a uniform? Is it a suit because he's the president? Famously, didn't he wear a beige suit and that was a big deal?
Yeah.
What do you mean uniform? I think most men are wearing suits to their fancy jobs. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos makes it a priority to get 8 hours of sleep every night. And who is more like a monk than Jeff Bezos? When I'm thinking who could I look to as a monk for role models, I always go Jeff Bezos.
When I say who is sleeping well at night and why, I think Jeff Bezos, because he has routine.
Yeah.
Routines root us. The 2 hours a day I spend meditating support the other 22 hours in my day, just as 22 hours influence my meditation. The relationship between the two is symbiotic.
The way that he's Jeff Bezos says 8 hours of sleep is a non-negotiable. And then meanwhile, when it comes to factory workers, he's like, you could piss your pants, bitch. Keep packing boxes. I will kill you, Jay Shetty.
If he wasn't well rested, he never would have thought of that.
When you're sleepy, you think pee is so important.
A sleepy man says, get off the conveyor belt for 5 minutes to go relieve yourself. But an awake man says, stay there.
I just can't get over this idea that anybody who wants to be more like a monk should ever be looking to Jeff Bezos as evidence that you're on the right path. I want to strangle people. I want to strangle them.
To say Jeff Bezos in the same sentence as monk.
In a book about it. If you went to the library and looked up the word monk, Jeff Bezos' name would be in that book.
I dedicate this episode of the podcast to Jeff Bezos, who's more monk than I'll ever be.
Yeah, because he's a bald bitch. Jeff Bezos, I challenge you to a fight. Unless you're too chicken.
So you just want to be mindful in every moment of your life and your routine.
Oh my God. CNBC's Make It Instagram Shark Tank star Kevin O'Leary. Who gives a fuck? I really think if you were to line people up in a list and say top of the list monks, bottom of the list people in this book, you'd have a perfect monk to non-monk list.
Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank.
What about the word Shark Tank
show on television? It just is. There is nothing about the moment. What is your motivation to go on Shark Tank? To be in service to others?
I've got an idea for protein cookie dough. I want $7 million for it.
We're all familiar with the idea of being in the moment. It's not hard to see that if you're running a race, you won't be able to go back and change how fast you ran at mile 2. Your only opportunity to succeed is in that moment. He says that multitasking doesn't work. You have to do single tasking. If I think about business when I'm brushing my teeth or in the shower, it doesn't feel nourishing and energizing.
Oh my God. Sorry. You guys, I hope you don't mind. I'm kind of rushing through these pages. I don't think you need to hear every little stupid thought on every little stupid thing he has to say, but I'm looking at my underlines, and here's my next thing I have underlined. We are constantly experiencing a range of activities, environments, but we don't pause to contemplate which ones appeal to us. How could that be possible? How could it be possible that you could be in different places and not know which ones you like and which ones you don't like? If I were to put you on a train track and then I were to put you in a nice restaurant, you'd be like, I haven't even stopped to think which I prefer.
Where do I want to live, though?
He goes, do you thrive in a busy environment or in solitude? Do you like safety or cozy nooks or spacious libraries? Do you prefer to be surrounded by stimulating artwork and music, or does uncluttered simplicity help you concentrate?
You've never considered
You just live in a house with like loud rock and roll music and you've never once thought, I don't like this. It's actually hard for me to get things done. Like, what do you mean no one ever thinks about what their environment does to them? What are you talking? You mentioned Marie Kondo in this book. You know that there's other people out there talking about this. Oh my God, he's a big on environmental awareness. He gives you a tip called try this. If you're looking for advice, look at the next try this.
What were the key features of a space where you felt comfortable? Quiet or loud? Big or small? Vibrant or plain?
You think 100 million users on Pinterest and nobody's ever thought about their environment before? Like, what are you talking about? From just a very basic, when you ask somebody, do you like a city or a country? They kind of know.
People know. It's a conversation that comes up all the time if you've ever lived in like more than one space for your entire fucking life. And even if you've only ever lived in one space, sometimes you say, I think I would do better in a different type of space. Or you say, I know that I love it here, and so I'm going to stay here.
And then he's a big, like, everything in your house should only have one purpose. Like, time has memory. Location has energy. Time has memory. So, like, sleep in your bed, work at your desk, eat in your kitchen. I was like, bitch, you've never been in a studio apartment.
I was going to say, there really is so much advice in this book that is so specifically
for Jessica Simpson to be like, yeah, and record in your recording studio downstairs and then have a Pilates room and have a boxing room.
Do not read this if you're poor.
Do not read this if you're alive. Only read this if you're dead and you have a lot of time on your hands. If you've ended up in one of those middle places.
Oh, and it's just books.
So he has one thing that I'm neither here nor there on it. I don't personally have an opinion, but I like applaud that it's like ballsy to say. So he talks about meditating. He's like, people come to me all the time and say, Jay, I've been meditating for 5 to 10 minutes every morning and it's not working. And he goes, that's because you're not doing it enough. You should be meditating for 1 hour a day, twice a day. And I am like, that's a huge ask, Jay. I respect it because a lot of people out there are saying just a few moments. If you could just take a few moments to reflect internally and breathe, you'll be good. He's like, no.
More.
An hour in the morning and an hour at night. At the end of this book, he goes, start with 21 minutes. It's like meditating and then chanting and then visualizing and then again at night. And he's like, and then build. And he's like, oh, you don't have the time? You don't have 2 hours a day to sit quiet? And I'm like, yeah. But I actually, it's the one thing in this book I like because I'm like, that's a crazy thing to say and I haven't heard it anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're right. I'm sure if I was dedicating 2 hours a day, every day to meditation, I would be better off than if I was doing it 5 minutes a morning once in a while. But I've never heard somebody be like, oh, you think it's easy? You think 5 minutes a day is fine?
He says to do everything as a single task and immerse yourself in it. Monks immerse themselves in activity. You eat lunch in silence and you taste your food and you drink your water and you do everything individually so that you can experience it and do it in a way that nourishes you.
Next time I'm like getting lunch with somebody I don't like, I'm going to go, monk style. I was hoping we could do this lunch monk style. The mind. That's a funny chapter.
The mind.
Next up, the mind.
Let's do the mind real quick. True growth requires understanding the mind. Oh, it is the filter, the judge, and the director of all of our experiences. But as evidenced by the conflict I felt on my shower adventure, we are not always of one mind. So he told this story about how he wanted to shower, but the shower was like a 20-minute walk away and it was muddy outside. And so he was like, is it even worth walking to the shower if I'm going to get muddy?
But he's like, the point is that you do something that sucks.
The monkey mind is a child and the monk mind is an adult. And so you're dealing with this erratic, needy version of yourself that doesn't really think about the consequences or results. And you have to use your adult monk mind to quiet it.
Yeah. A senior monk once told me an old Cherokee story about the dilemmas which we all agonize over. An elder tells his grandson, every choice in life is a battle between two wolves inside of us.
Which wolf are you feeding?
And then he goes, listen, we all have enemies. An enemy, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a person who is actively opposed to or hostile to someone or something. Thank you, 5th grade me. What do you mean you're quoting the Oxford English Dictionary?
For an enemy.
Before I became a monk, my own mind stopped me from doing what I loved because it was too risky. It allowed me to consume a chocolate bar and a liter of soda daily, even though I wanted to be healthy. It made me compare myself to others instead of concentrating on my own growth. Luckily, we are not our minds. Which I do think that is like meditation, is being able to like watch your thoughts. But I just don't care about you, Jay Shetty. I wasn't like trying to become a monk so that I could cut back on sugar. He literally was like, now when I'm in the gym doing crunches, I just focus on another body part so I don't realize how much it burns. And I'm like, oh my God.
I can't believe you're like alpha braining monk mentality. It is so cruel.
Oh my God. We are now at my favorite line in the whole book.
Yay!
So he's talking again about the monkey mind versus the monk mind, the parent and the child, and the way like you should talk to your own mind as if your attached mind, your emotional mind, your reactive mind is like a child, and your more logical side is the parent, and you should like try to help talk your child mind through the different problems they have. The monkey mind is a child and the monk mind is an adult. A child cries when it doesn't get what it wants, ignoring what it already has. A child struggles to appreciate real value. It would happily trade a stock certificate for some candy. To choose a stock certificate
over candy? Listen, I'm a grown-up and you can throw your certificate in the fucking trash.
I mean, like a certificate is quite literally a symbol. There's no real value there. By definition, the certificate is a piece of paper that represents the ownership
of nothing.
A stock that is essentially just a game of poker. It's literally a symbol of a symbol of a symbol. And then candy is in your hand and gives you literal energy. I mean, those are calories that you can run on. A stock certificate as the example of real value is literally one of the most business school brain dead. How did the editor let him say that? You couldn't think of one example of something that has intrinsic value? Like firewood or something? Quite literally, at the end of the day, in the apocalypse, that stock certificate means nothing and candy is fuel for your body to keep existing. I cannot believe the way that this is the stupidest. This could almost be an example of the difference. Only our child minds see the true value of things. An adult might think a stock certificate is valuable, but a child sees the cookie that helps it live till tomorrow. This is so stupid. I want to die.
So you have to differentiate between your should self, what you should do because it's good, and your want self, what you want to do in the moment.
Master your senses. The monkey mind is reactive. The monk mind is proactive. Let's say that whenever you go on YouTube to watch one video, you end up going down a rabbit hole.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so then he talks about the stubborn subconscious, and he uses one of my least favorite examples that people ever use
in the world.
It's the story of this guy, Joshua Bell, a world-famous violinist who decided to busk outside a DC subway station during rush hour. Playing a rare and precious instrument, he opened up his case for donations and performed some of the most difficult pieces ever written for the violin. In about 45 minutes, barely anyone stopped to listen or donate. He made about $30. 3 days before the subway performance, he had played the same violin at Boston Symphony Hall, where the decent seats went for $100. There are many reasons why people may not stop to hear a brilliant musician playing, but one of them is certainly that they are on autopilot, powering through the rush hour crowds.
How much do we miss when we're in default mode? I hate shit like this because it really is
people are going to work on purpose. They have to get there. There will be penalties.
People are just fucking busy. To say you're too busy to notice what I think is important, shut the fuck up.
Also, I'm sorry, but I live in New York City. People busk all the time and often draw a crowd.
Yeah.
I actually see people oftentimes enjoy buskers. I see people stop and dance. But the truth of the matter is, if it's 7:45 on a weekday morning and you have a meeting, you just do have to go.
You don't have time. And I'm sorry, you can say stop and smell the roses, but maybe you did yesterday. Maybe there was another great violinist yesterday who doesn't have the qualifications of this guy, but also was really enjoyable to hear on the subway. And maybe yesterday you stopped to listen. And today you say 2 days in a row, you can't stop and listen.
I just find that to be such a bad example.
It really is this thing of because you're not valuing what I value, you're obviously just not paying attention. And maybe someone just hates violin music.
So don't be negative. Don't say my life sucks, because your brain will take it literally. So the best way to overwrite the voices in your head is to start talking to them. Talk in the mirror every day.
Use positive direction to reframe unwanted thoughts. I can't do this becomes I can do this by.
This is actually a good one. The perspective scale. Every time you think something's bad, put it on a scale from 1 to 10, where the 10 is everybody in your family dies. He's yeah, losing your job's not so bad, huh? And I was yeah, unless everyone in your family's going to starve to death now.
Sometimes reframing works best on paper. So you want to sit down and write about what's bothering you. And sometimes when you write it down, you realize it's not so bad.
Find self-compassion. Write down things you can do it. Thanks, Jay Shetty. That being said, if anybody on here ever found my secret Strava, you would, there's a lot of, I write to myself I am a newborn baby. I'm
you worked really hard today, Claire.
You can't win them all, but you gave it your best, and that hill was really steep, and better luck next time. Thanks for even trying. That's what I say to myself. I go, good job on even lacing up, Claire.
I hate Strava's athlete AI where it tells you like,
oh, it doesn't think I'm an athlete, so I'm not a part of that program.
Oh my God. I'm on this like athlete AI beta program where it analyzes your runs for you and it'll go slower than usual. And I'm just like, well, don't tell me. I know what's usual and I know that I'm on my period right now. So how about you shut the fuck up?
Can I say I hate the way that it'll be like, congrats, Claire, you set 19 goals today.
And you're like, I've just never run that route before.
Yeah, and they'll be like, you've never run that third block faster than that second block. They'll be like, you've never run this fast with wins at this time during the morning. And I'm like, don't, shut the fuck up. Play it to me straight. I'm the slowest girl in the town.
From India to Huron, you took McGinnis Boulevard by storm. That's niche.
I wish we could stop talking about running, but I hate Jay Shetty.
So you got to stay present. We're almost always somewhere else, reliving the past or worrying about the future. Is your mind seeking to shield or distract you? Instead of thinking about what mattered in the past or what the future might hold, guide your mind back to the moment. Oh.
He also gives the advice of treat yourself with the same love and respect you show to others. Oh.
You will not like to hear what I say about others. Detachment is a form of self-control. Okay, so you want to detach because nothing owns you. You don't own
This is
nothing.
where he takes that quote that's so good that I liked. Oh, you know who it is? It was Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. Shout out Islam. I believe Ramadan's on its way.
I think it just ended last weekend.
Well, you know what they say about the year.
It happens again. Every time we finish one, it starts another.
And in the grand scheme of things, but what is a year? Detachment is not that you own nothing, but that nothing should own you. And he loves how someone summarized it like that. Oh my God, he also says, you know who else has a good version of that? Marie Kondo. So if you were like doing a running tally.
If you think the Prophet Muhammad, his nephew Ali, or Marie Kondo are the same, you're right.
Yeah, except for Marie Kondo, this is like her third shout out.
So you want to practice detachment by experimenting with discomfort, like fasting or meditating in heat or cold, or
not having sex,
silent, or not booking.
He's like, oh, that was really hard for me. He really wants you to, he's like, I could kind of do 100 crunches and that's not hard. I could live with nothing and that's not hard, but you know what was hard? Like not bucking. He says it like 6 times.
I mean, he overcame. So he talks about how experimenting with discomfort helps you detach because when you're not comfortable, you have to like recenter your mind and detach it from your body. And when your head goes rolling down the stream, you say, detached. The body is a vessel. It contains us.
Okay, you guys are never going to guess what he thinks about the ego, but it's no bueno.
Guess who his ego example is?
Who?
Frank Abagnale of Catch Me If You Can fame. He goes, he had an ego about his crimes and then he got humbled by the justice system. And then he found his dharma, which is helping the FBI catch other people doing crimes.
I don't think that that's a good example, really, because all of those crimes led to a memoir and then a book, which led him to Leonardo DiCaprio, whose dharma is telling others how to fix the environment while he eats shellfish on a yacht.
When we bluff our way through life pretending to be who we're not, we look worse than we truly are. The ego creates hierarchies. When success goes over our heads, we forget that everyone else is equal. I wonder what it would take for us to all see each other as citizens of the world.
Jay Shetty, I saw you at a party once that I wish I had tested this. I wish I had said, hey, I'm the smallest podcast in the room. You want to do it? Imagine him on this podcast and me asking him dead up ideas.
Imagine me asking him on this podcast when he says we have to view every single person in the world as our child, what he thinks of Gazan children.
He wouldn't answer that. He's got
clients.
Anyway, then he makes fun of a bunch of dumb bitches who are the Jimmy Kimmel Show because they do this thing called like, are you excited for this band? And it's a made up band. And you'll never guess, teenagers, they fell for it because they're sheep, loser sheep with big egos.
He says your ego makes you lie. And that sucks. You lie because you don't want to seem like an outsider on the Jimmy Kimmel Show.
When success goes to our heads, we forget that everyone is equal, no matter who you are or what you've achieved. Notice if you are expecting or demanding special treatment because of your presumed status. Nobody deserves a better seat in the theater of life. One of his good friends and clients is Will Smith. You're going to tell me that Will Smith
doesn't deserve a better seat in the theater of life?
You might wait in line for hours. When's the last time Will Smith waited in line for hours?
Okay, when he was greeting all those people who came to see him and telling him he was amazing.
Or you may simply hope for a better seat, as most of us do. But if you feel like you are entitled to better, dig into that feeling. Oh, he says it's actually totally fine to pay for a better seat because that's like you've like bought the seat. But you can't think you're just entitled to it. What makes you better than the other audience members? The arrogant ego desires respect, whereas the humble worker inspires respect.
Ego isolates you. Don't live in a world where you start thinking you're special and that one person is worth your time and another isn't.
Here's another thing about being like, don't talk shit.
He also talks about institutional egos, where institutions think that they're like above certain processes and mindsets. And so...
Wait, this is one of my favorite stories in the whole book.
Organizations get trapped in a business as usual mindset without responding to the changes around them. When Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix, offered to sell a 49% stake in his company to Blockbuster, he was turned down. 10 years later, Blockbuster went bankrupt. And today, Netflix is worth at least $100 billion. There is danger in the words, we've always done it this way, or I already knew that.
So this Blockbuster Netflix story is well known in the tech world. So when I told it to around 70 marketing directors at a conference, I asked them, how many of you, when I shared this, felt that you already knew what I was going to say? About half of them raised their hands, and I told them that the conviction that they already knew what they needed to know was exactly the problem that these companies had. When you presume knowledge, you put up a barrier that nothing can cross and miss out on a potential learning opportunity.
What was the learning opportunity then?
What if there was an extra piece of that story? This point itself was the extra piece.
What's the extra piece?
The extra piece is that he goes, did you think you already knew that story? And when they said yes, he goes, exactly. He didn't have an extra piece of the story. Just that they had correctly assumed that they had already heard the story and they had, but...
This is why he's brilliant.
Imagine going up to somebody and being like, have you heard this story before? And them going, yep. And then going, exactly. You're kind of an idiot, huh? But they had heard this story. And him going, but you're not getting it.
You thinking you know the story that you know is you not remembering the meaning of the story that you know.
You maybe should have thought of a different story where people didn't know the second ending. Like that old lady who got covered in hot McDonald's coffee.
And the one who lived in a shoe.
Old ladies be living lives. Why don't you start there? Do you guys hear how crazy that is? That he was like, here's the story. Have you heard that? Okay. Second lesson. Yes, you have, but no, you haven't. Like, what are you talking about? He literally puts in parentheses, this point itself was the extra piece. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. Oh my God. Okay, this is actually another weird one. The ego isolates us. When a Roman general returned from victorious battles, it is said that it was customary to have a slave stand behind him whispering, remember that you are a man in his ear. No matter how well he had done or how lauded he was for his leadership, he was still a man, like all other men.
A slave said what?
There's not a questioning of that part. He's like, this is a really good example of a humble Roman man who understood that at the end of the day, we're all people, except for, I guess, the human that he owned. Like, there's not a lick of questioning of slavery. Can you imagine telling a story with the word slave and being like, this is an example of a really good man?
What a humble warrior.
Just can't even fathom being like, this guy's slave. It really helped him stay grounded. Be like the slave owner. No, what the fuck? Like, that's a crazy story. Is that what the monks think?
Have you read this book by any monks?
I just like, is that not the more fucked up thing? Like, I cannot even fathom using that as an example of a good person. Oh my God. And then in the second paragraph is Robert Downey Jr. Being like, at home, I have to let the dog out. I'm Iron Man on the streets. I'm like, no, you're not. You're Iron Man in a movie. So if you're keeping a running tally of who Jay Shetty's heroes are, it's Robert Downey Jr., Leonardo DiCaprio, Jeff Bezos, Kevin O'Leary, and this Roman general who owns people.
I can't believe the Robert Downey Jr. like humbling anecdote didn't involve jail time.
Yeah,
Robert
he's an addict.
Jr. went to jail.
And he struggled with addiction, but he's like, what keeps me grounded? My dog. She shits. I don't even believe that he's letting that dog out. There's one thing I know about rich people is that those dogs shit inside.
So then he talks about leaving the ashram and having to make the decision. He says that his health was a problem. He wasn't healthy there. This is the only thing in the entire book where I said, expand. What do you mean living at the ashram wasn't healthy? Like, what do you mean living a life of like vegan lentils and no material possessions was like causing you ill health? I'm physically not cut out for the life I'm trying to live. Trying to live in the ashram may not be my calling. This thought hits me and it upsets me deeply. I can't see myself leaving, and I wonder if my doubts come from my physical state. Am I in the right frame of mind to make this decision? When I leave the hospital, I go to London for further medical attention.
I love this. So him and his mentor, they go for a drive. I tell him what I've been thinking. He listens for a while, asks them questions, thinks. Then he says, some people who go to university become professors and some who go to university become entrepreneurs. Which is better?
Neither, I say. You've done your training. I think it's best for you to move on now.
Wow, they hate his ass. That was 3 years of monk training. I could have said that. I would have gone, I bet you guys think everybody's equal and all is fair in love and war. This feels like when you make up a game with a little kid. You're like, oh my God, the game's over. You found the magic card.
Now let's play the quiet game where you leave.
So then he goes home and he's really embarrassed because my college friends are wondering if I'm going to get a real job. They're kind of like, you failed at being a monk? ? You failed at thinking about nothing? ? I don't know anybody who wouldn't think being a monk is low-key hard. I think we all know that that's like not nothing.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the season of White Lotus is about, is it not?
Hey, Mike White, if you're listening, feel free to come on the pod.
Oh, we would do White Lotus.
Ashley would be really good on it. I'm not a good actress.
I think you are. I think you just need better direction than ourselves.
Fair enough.
My biggest dream has been destroyed, and I feel the blow to my ego deeply. It's one of the toughest, most humiliating, crushing experiences of my life, and one of the most important. Sometimes it takes a deflated ego to show you what the inflated ego thought of itself. I was humbled. I mean, I knew that you thought you were the number one monk. I know that you were failing at monk training because you thought you were top monk.
Top monk. No, there's a show for Bravo. That's funny.
So he had to learn humility, which he did not learn from 3 years in the ashram.
Is he talks about this like humility test he does at the monk school, and everyone failed, but I passed.
What was the test?
It was write down a moment of when something happened to you that you don't think you deserved. Oh. And everybody wrote down like an unlucky or unfair thing that happened to them that was bad. And I wrote something that was good, because sometimes imposter syndrome is like actually a little good for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just self-awareness.
I agree.
And he was like, you all think you're just victims, but some of you have gotten lucky. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a monk.
Incredible.
I'm a monk because I hate myself enough.
For Claire Parker, more monk than I'll ever be.
Do you think I could monk?
I think you would find it really enjoyable to do like a month of monking.
And I think it would be good for the people around me. I think they'd like me better monked out. I'm too monkey brained. I'm over here eating all the candy.
No stock certificates as far as the eye can see.
I gotta live like a monk and start acquiring some stock certificates. I gotta get on Shark Tank like a monk would.
I gotta be like Robert Downey Jr., not Iron Man, but someone who walks their dog.
Okay, so keep an eye on your ego, detach from your ego, step outside of failure.
When we feel insecure, we aren't where we want to be in our careers, our relationships, or in reference to the other milestones we've set for ourselves. Either the ego comes to our defense or our self-esteem plummets. Humility comes from accepting where you are without seeing it as a reflection of who you are. There, you can use your imagination to find success. This is the thing that I've been like really annoyed by lately, is this idea that like seeing the positives in your failures is actually the success. Like not everything has to be success. Like not everything is a moment of like grand realization and success. Like I don't think humility is realizing that you were the most successful monk the whole time. I think humility is realizing that like you are like living your practice.
Humility is the way that I keep doing my hair and it never really comes out right and I won't learn from it. But I just keep trying.
It's a practice.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect. And it's not a learning. It's not a study. Small wins. Have you guys heard of these? For example, this gold medalist swimmer says, my long-term goals are what I would consider to be my dreams, but my short-term goals are attainable on a daily or monthly basis.
More gold medals.
I like to make my short-term goals something that makes me feel better and sets me up to better prepare for long-term goals. That's so funny because my goal is to be a billionaire. And every day I wake up and go, today's the day I'm going to become a billionaire. I've never thought about being like, make 1 million, then make 2 millions, then make 3 million.
1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4.
Wanna be a billionaire? Work some more. 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, 8. Soon you'll be like Jeff Bezos. Great. We hate this book. When we hate something so much, it makes us drunk. Ashley can't breathe. She's choking on her negativity.
That is so true.
Can I say something? Breathe in for 4 seconds and then hold it for 4 seconds and then breathe out for 4 seconds. I learned that.
I can't count. Okay. So he's talking about looking for feedback. You have to temper the ego by paying close attention to how people react to you, both verbally and non-verbally.
Also, don't ask no people, but don't ask every person. Instead, cultivate small groups of counsel around specific areas. Yeah.
Don't buy into your own hype. Jay Shetty. A lot of headshots on your Instagrams.
Real greatness. Monks aren't impressed by how long you meditate. We ask how deep you went. Bruce Lee said, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Imagine somebody who's done 10,000 different kinds of kicking.
And being like, that's point, not even scary.
Because imagine, I mean, I can think of 8 kicks, but after that, I'm getting goofy with it. My hip flexors are in danger.
10,000 types. That's a lot of kicking. And then you get to the point where you realize that real greatness means being in service.
Well, he says you have to visualize. He gives you like a 10-page example on how to visualize. And it's like, do you have a brain? Use it. Think about something.
I realized that we were trained to meditate in peace so that we could meditate in chaos. So that's when he learns about visualization. So when you're in a chaotic place, you can visualize yourself into a calm place and still practice meditation there. Since then, I've meditated in planes, in the middle of New York, in Hollywood. There are distractions, of course, but meditation doesn't eliminate distractions. It manages them. What does he mean when he says he meditated in Hollywood? This is a very geographical specific question, but I get with New York City being a loud town. It's everywhere you go in New York is loud.
This is actually, there's an episode of Sex and the City when Charlotte's getting acupuncture for fertility. And he's like, you have to learn to quiet your mind.
But in Hollywood, first of all, Hollywood is like
a suburb.
I mean, it's like a neighborhood in the middle of LA where why would Jay Shetty even really be there?
He lives there.
Hollywood?
Yeah, he wanted to be near Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck doesn't live in Hollywood.
Well, that's why he's on his journey still.
I'm saying LA is so spread out. There are so many quiet places in LA. Like, what does he mean? I'm so annoyed by him. And the lying. So much of this book is lying.
Maybe he means spiritually, like amongst all the fame and the whores and the fame whores, he's managed to find peace.
The little birds from Avanjogia's poems.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're on to the final chunk. The most important thing you can learn is that you need to be in service.
Well, he says gratitude is good for you.
When you start your day with gratitude, you'll be open to opportunities. Gratitude journaling reduces intrusive thoughts and helps participants sleep better. I love when he comes in with science.
Also, being kindness is really good.
Being kindness.
I know. Have you guys not heard of gratitude? Like, I can't really talk to you guys like you're dummies. You know about being grateful, right? You know about being kind.
If you want to be grateful at all times, in all circumstances, even if your life isn't perfect, build your gratitude like a muscle. If you train it now, it will only strengthen over time.
Relationships. These are hard. You have to be more loving, but then also they might suck. Make your own family, he says.
Dude, I think he hates his family.
Yeah, he at one point is like, sure, my mom would do anything for me and she always picks up the phone and cares about my well-being, but she would never talk about my business with me. All she cares about is am I eating well? Am I sleeping well? How do I feel?
Does he have a dad?
I don't know, but I also am like, why would your mom care about your... I don't know. Everyone in the world cares about your business. Only your mom is asking how you slept. As we traveled and connected with people across India and Europe, I began to recognize that everyone in the world was my family. He goes, you can kind of learn from anybody, not even just teachers. And I went, I know.
That's kind of the point of what you learned in the ashram.
Yeah, now he's teaching it to me again. Try to trust people, but don't trust untrustworthy people. That's a biggie. Are you attracted to them? Are you connected to them? Quality, not quantity. There's 6 love exchanges.
He says that if you give love, you can't expect it back, but you will get it back, but not from the places you expect. When you give love, it always comes back to you, but you can't sit there being like, well, I did this person a favor. Why didn't they favor me back?
He also talks about meeting his wife and how when they first started dating, he saved up some money and took her to Wicked on Broadway and whatever they call that in London.
West End,
the
I
West
believe.
End. And then he took her to Le Conde Lo Cotelli, a fancy restaurant that's way above my pay grade. And she was polite but unimpressed. Afterwards, she said, you didn't have to do that. I like to just go to a grocery store and walk around. And I am like, okay, well, a play is culture. Why don't you engage in culture, Rondi? I get that you're such a cool girl who doesn't need fancy things, but I wouldn't call a play, obviously a play is a luxury, but that's an experience. I think you can find it in your heart to like that.
I don't think it's the end of the world to like do something nice together.
I myself, this is him talking, love gifts and extravagant demonstrations of love. Okay, so what did being a monk do for you at all? And for a while, I cluelessly continued to shower Rondi with grand gestures. I got it completely wrong. She wasn't impressed by any of that. She's not very fancy. Even after my years in the ashram, I could still be swayed by external influences or my own preferences rather than careful observation of what she liked. Dude, you didn't learn anything in the ashram. I've never seen someone more fame-obsessed. Oh my God, and the best way to keep an old relationship alive is to like find new things to do together. Okay, service. So this is the end of the book. Did you know the whole point of life is to be in service to others?
Oh my God, wait, you forgot to say what the new thing they do together to keep their relationship alive.
Service?
Escape rooms.
Can I tell you my escape room was this book? I was like, how fast can I get out of here?
What's the riddle to get me out? Oh, he also is very specific in being like, FYI, don't be in an abusive relationship. This doesn't apply to that. Next.
Okay, then he talks about how you're never going to think you have enough to donate, but like the poorer you are, the more you should donate. And he says...
Oh my God. Wait, we're getting to my favorite line.
Is it about the findings that the bottom percent of Americans give more income to charity on average? They give 3%, whereas people in the top 20% give half that, 1%.
But just to be fair, the wealthy are still responsible for over 70% of charitable contributions. Listen, poor people are more generous, but rich people just have more money. So the amount of money they give is more. So you should like stop being such an asshole to rich people.
Just the way he'll bend over backwards to make sure that no wealthy person's ever offended by him. It's just very clear who he wants to be rubbing elbows with. The question to contemplate is, who is wealthier, the one with more money or the one who serves? The one with more money, for sure. Has more money. The one with more money has the more money. Serve with intention, serve within your dharma. Again, that can mean being Leonardo DiCaprio and flying on your private jet to your own documentary. Being that god-awful Netflix movie, Don't Look Up, where you tell all the poors that they need to work harder.
The hero's journey isn't fulfilled until he makes it home safely and shares what he has gained, the elixir, with others. The idea of service is woven into the classic story structure, and it's a key part of the happy ending. Does he think that he's a hero?
Yes, he helped raise, with YouTube, $150,000 for a children's foundation. And I'm like, that's definitely what you get for like a single talk. You and YouTube together came up with $150K. That's nothing. He also is like, all suffering belongs to all of us, which is an interesting take because he also is like, don't let the negativity get you down. Turn off the radio.
We're motivated to serve when we think of the whole world as one family. You wouldn't want your child to be enslaved or your parent to be homeless. Why would you want those hardships for anyone else's child or parent?
Yeah, but also like if it's going to bum you out, don't think about it.
Don't think about it.
Because you can't really criticize anybody else for what they're doing with their bombs until you've cleaned out your own heart.
I just think in terms of the people who are reading his work, there are some people who need to hear that.
So I have a theory about that. Who's reading his work?
Just us?
Yes.
Oh.
I do think this is the kind of book where you'd feel guilty for admitting you hadn't finished it yet.
So he put that part at the end?
Well, no, I just think
he
that
said
like
no slaves, but he saved it for the end so that all the people he works with who do have slaves like don't have to.
I just don't think anybody's ever read this book.
Yeah.
Period. And I don't think anyone's ever gotten to the end. But I think it's a book you're always meaning to get to.
You like get it for your friends who know him.
Oh my God, his final chapter is about chanting. And he says, it's beautiful to wake up or go to sleep listening to the sound of your own voice. Not for me.
What was his college talks called again?
Think Out Loud.
I'm sure he believes this. There is no universal plan for peace and purpose. The way we get there is by training our minds to focus on how we react, respond, and commit to what we want in life in our own pace, in our own time.
Ashley.
Yeah, Claire?
Final thoughts.
I really think that this man needs to be sent off the plank of Leo DiCaprio's yacht.
I would love to just say, sure. If you're so detached, why don't you give it all up?
Yeah.
Give it all up, buddy. Live that life you keep flouting. He reminds me of, I know we keep referencing White Lotus, but he reminds me of Parker Posey's character.
Yeah.
In the White Lotus being like, I'm just too old to live an uncomfortable life. But you guys should. You go ahead and do it. It sounds fun for you.
I really think that what he's done here is one of the more fucked up things that mankind enjoys doing.
Because it really is just this like cyclical ideology to give everyone permission to keep being as selfish as ever, but like without guilt, without anxiety.
And I feel like to co-opt it from an ideology that preaches the exact opposite. Like the exact opposite point is being made by the scripture that he's like pulling from.
How many more martinis would you like?
Oh, I'm covering my glass.
He should cover his glass. I would drug and kill him. I would poison his ass, Charlie Angels style. I would show up in a beer garden outfit and give him a beer full of poison. And how fertile would you say the soil is?
I mean, less than none. I think every plant, how is it going to set roots in this thing?
I want to quote Tyra Banks, former memoirist. It's so bad I want to give you a 0, but I can't, so I'll give you a 1. And who do we give 100 to?
Thank God we have our 5-star reviewing wormies. Support for Celebrity Memoir Book Club comes from the all-new Nissan Murano. Sometimes you gotta sing. Sometimes you gotta sit in silence. Sometimes you gotta just go for a drive.
Whatever you gotta do today, the driver's seat of the all-new Nissan Murano is the place to do it. With an elevated modern interior and a bold new exterior look, you can let down all your walls and be whoever you gotta be, all while looking stylish and put together. Isn't that the dream?
The all-new Nissan Murano, your refuge to do exactly what you gotta do.